My name is Alfred Sin. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, and I'll be talking to you today about running your Red Hat and SUSE workloads more effectively with the Azure Hybrid Benefit. So today I'll go over some of the capabilities that we have for Linux and open source on Azure. We'll talk about the payment options that you have on Azure when you're running Linux workloads. So these include pay-as-you-go. I'll go into a little bit about the software prepaid program, and we'll talk about bring your own subscription. Then I'll talk about the Azure Hybrid Benefit and how it works for Linux, because that's a brand new functionality that's just coming out. I'll give you a demo of how the Azure Hybrid Benefit works for Linux, and then we'll wrap things up. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Linux and open source on Azure and some of the capabilities that we have as a platform to help make your lives easier. The first one you might have heard of before, it's our integrated support. And the reason why we keep bringing this up is because it's so great. We have dedicated support engineers from Red Hat, from Microsoft, and from SUSE who work together to resolve your support cases. So if you're dealing with, for example, a RHEL issue, the Red Hat and Microsoft support engineers can collaborate on the same case, sharing the same context between companies to identify where the issue lies and help you resolve it in the fastest manner possible. And it's the same for SUSE and Microsoft. There are dedicated SUSE support engineers and dedicated Microsoft support engineers, and they can collaborate on the support cases as well. And that just benefits you because it helps you resolve your issues faster. In terms of Linux native tooling, we have a few things. One that comes to mind is the Azure Tune kernel. This is where we work with various Linux distro vendors to tune the kernels that they ship on their Linux images in the Azure marketplace so that the kernels are optimized for Azure. And this includes things like accelerated networking and whatnot. Another capability that comes to mind that's not mentioned in this slide is the Azure Serial Console. So if the way the Serial Console works and the way it's useful is in those can't connect scenarios. So for example, if your VM cannot boot, if your file system is messed up, if the networking is down, if you otherwise can't SSH into the VM, you have the Serial Console, because the Serial Console basically takes the serial port of the VM and brings that out to you in the portal. So if you're left stuck in a can't connect scenario, odds are you'll be able to use the Serial Console to fix your way out of it. We also have a tool called the Azure Cloud Shell. This is available both in the Azure portal as well as at shell.azure.com. And the Azure Cloud Shell is a really, really great, convenient way to get started as a developer on Azure. It comes preloaded with the Azure CLI. It comes with Python, Ansible, Terraform. So you can use these standard developer tools right in your Azure environment to get you, started with your Azure environment quickly and easily. We've got a lot of cost-effective options for you as well. That'll be the focus of the rest of this presentation you're about to hear. And we've got all kinds of application/platform level functionality for security, update management, governance, and general management of your VM. So obviously we've got things like automatic patching and updates with update management. We've got policy configuration with Azure Policy. We have Azure Monitor and a whole slew of other things, including, of course, fundamentals like high availability. Like Azure has several different levels of high availability. We could spend a whole talk on that, but I'm not going to. Instead, let's talk about payment options. So Linux on Azure payment options. What does that even mean? There's 3 general payment options for Linux on Azure, and this applies to both Red Hat Enterprise Linux, RHEL, and SUSE Linux Enterprise Servers, SLES. So the most common one that you've probably heard of is pay-as-you-go. We've also got prepaid software plans, and we've also got a bring your own subscription option. Pay-as-you-go is pretty much exactly as it sounds like. You pay for what you use. You can start your VMs, you can stop them anytime, and you're only billed for the amount of time that the VM was running. This allows you to do scenarios like trying things out before you buy them. So you can deploy, for example, a proof of concept, you can try it out, and then you can stop your VM whenever, and you only get billed for that. You're not required to have any sort of pre-existing reservations for usage or anything. However, if you've decided that, hey, you do want to spend more resources on Azure and you're looking for ways to optimize your costs, prepaid software plans are a good idea. They come with a great pricing discount, but the downside of that is that you have to commit to a certain amount of time. So you need to commit to either a 1-year or a 3-year length of usage to realize that full software discount. Another option to save costs is bring your own subscription. So the bring your own subscription images that we have available for both RHEL and SLES, they allow you to use your existing subscriptions, your existing software subscriptions, which you've either purchased through the Red Hat Cloud Access program or the SUSE public cloud program, and use those with the BYOS images in Azure. So effectively, these BYOS images don't bill for any of the software fees that are associated with the pay-as-you-go images, and you're expected to bring your own source of updates through your own separate software subscription. Now, all of these options are available through what we call images in the Azure Marketplace. And these images come in a few different flavors. For pay-as-you-go, we've got your standard rel and SLES pay-as-you-go images. So these come entitled to access your standard base software repositories. You can spin up a VM with them and you're good to go. But for more special use cases, we also have a few different varieties. For example, if you're looking into doing some high-performance computing specific workloads, we have the SLES for HPC pay-as-you-go images, which include access to special HPC packages. We also have rel and SLES for SAP images, and those include access to the specific SAP software packages that will allow you to run your SAP workloads on Azure. And then, of course, we have rel with the high availability add-on in case you're looking to run highly available workloads, but not necessarily a full-on SAP workload. So these pay-as-you-go images, they charge kind of two separate things. They charge for the base compute fee, and then they charge for a software fee on top. So that's good to know, and that's good to keep in mind as you compare and contrast them with the BYOS images. Before we move on to the BYOS images, I'll just quickly say that the prepaid software plans work with the pay-as-you-go images. So you can apply this software discount onto the pay-as-you-go images, which helps reduce your cost. Now, if you want to zero out that software cost on top entirely because you have your own subscriptions elsewhere, that's where the BYOS images come in handy. When you're using the BYOS images, all you're paying for is the base compute fee. So you're only paying for the hardware and you're not paying any extra for the software on top. So you don't get any packages with them. You don't get access to the SAP packages. You don't get access to the base SLES or rel packages. But instead, you're expected to connect those VMs deployed off of the BYOS images to your own source of updates. And that's where your previously owned subscriptions come in handy. The catch with these pay-as-you-go and BYOS subscriptions is once you deploy a pay-as-you-go image and once you deploy a BYOS image, you couldn't really switch back and forth. So if you've deployed a bunch of pay-as-you-go images, they will be left billing for both the hardware and the software fee, even if you find yourself with a rel or SLES subscription in hand. However, that is changing. So that takes us to our next topic, which is the Azure Hybrid Benefit and how we're making Linux subscriptions and managing Linux subscriptions easier for you with this Azure Hybrid Benefit. We're announcing a new update to the benefit, which will allow you to use it with Linux, with rel and SLES. So how does this work and what is this? Well, if you are a rel or SLES customer on Azure running rel or SLES VMs and you have rel or SLES subscriptions separately, you might be interested in this. This allows you to convert your running pay-as-you-go VMs. So if you remember back a couple slides, there's a whole set of pay-as-you-go images. If you have VMs running off of those images, those VMs can be converted to charge only the BYOS fee, so only the hardware fee. This is available in the portal, it's available in the CLI, it's super easily accessible. And the key thing here is that you can do this without rebooting or redeploying the VM, so you won't experience any downtime at all. So that means that you're running workloads that you have already. They will not be impacted when you do this conversion and you use this benefit on your VMs. So you'll save software costs because you'll be using your own subscriptions and the cost of the VMs will lower. And it's very, very useful. Here's a couple of use cases for you in case you're wondering how you might want to use this. So the first use case is, let's say that you have an existing workload running on Azure. Maybe it was in a POC state. Maybe it was in a test state, a dev test environment or something, and you're looking to move it to production. And you already have existing rel and SLES subscriptions that you didn't want to use yet when you deployed on Azure because you were just running a POC or you were just running a test workload. In this case, when you want to move to production, you probably want to keep those VMs if they're working for you. There's no sense redeploying a brand new environment and having to tweak it and set it all up again. But at the same time, you probably want to optimize your costs. And if you have a rel and SLES software subscription handy, you probably want to use them with those pay-as-you-go VMs to reduce the overall cost that you incurred because you've already purchased those subscriptions. So with the Azure Hybrid Benefit, when you move your workloads to production or when you're moving them around, you can apply the benefit to your existing pay-as-you-go VMs and lower the cost by removing the software fee and only charging for that base hardware fee. And you can do that without any interruption, any downtime to your POC or your dev test workload or anything. So that's one use case. Another use case is, and I've seen some customers ask me about this, is where you want to migrate to Azure as soon as possible. So maybe the people around you are saying, hey, you should get onto Azure. Maybe you have someone above you telling you to move on to Azure as soon as possible. Regardless, you want to move to the cloud, and Azure is your chosen cloud. However, you might also be having conversations in parallel with Red Hat or SUSE about preferential volume pricing for software subscriptions. And you don't necessarily want to block on those conversations to migrate to the cloud. But at the same time, you're worried about being locked into a specific payment model. With this hybrid benefit, what you can do is you can start your deployment on the pay-as-you-go images, continue your conversations in parallel, and then once you've secured that preferential volume pricing with your either Red Hat or SUSE, then you can apply that retroactively to your VMs that you have already deployed. And those VMs will not get rebooted, there's no downtime, and they'll start charging less because you have bought separate subscriptions. So this allows you to worry about one fewer thing when you're considering an Azure migration, and the worry that you might previously have on your mind is being locked into a specific payment model. That's no longer a concern. So you're probably wondering how the Azure Hybrid Benefit works for Linux exactly. This is such new functionality that I get to be the pleasure to probably be the first person to demo this to you. So first I'll tell you kind of how it works and just a high-level overview of the steps to get it working for you. And then I'll show you exactly how it works in both the portal and the CLI. So here's how you get started with it. We're launching this initially as a preview phase. So this will be accessible after you fill out the form. The link to the form is located here. It's you can find it at aka.ms/ahb-linux-form. And once you're done there, you'll get a confirmation from Microsoft saying, hey, you're now enrolled in the Azure Hybrid Benefit. Now, if you're a Red Hat customer, you will also want to sign up for Red Hat Cloud Access. And what that'll do is it'll give you a chance to enable your Azure subscriptions for Cloud Access, and those are the Azure subscriptions which contain the VMs you want to use the benefit on. After that, you're done. You're able to use the benefit. The benefit, like I said, it's available in both the Azure portal and in the Azure CLI. And within both the portal and CLI, it's available during the VM create experience or the VM update experience. In the portal, you can find it in the VM configuration blade. In the Azure CLI, you can use either AZVM update, as you can see in the slide, or if you want to do it at create time, you can use AZVM create. And there's a license type parameter, and there's a couple special values in there, /BYOS or rel BYOS. So that's enough talking. Let's show you how it actually works. I'm in the CLI. I'm just going to run this command here. So what I'm going to do here is I have an existing VM. It's named rel 7.8 latest, so it's running rel. It was created off of a rel 7.8 pay-as-you-go image. It's in a reso script named delete me, so I remember to delete it later. And I'm going to give it a license type of rel_BYOS. What does this do? This will specifically enable the benefit on the VM. It'll tell the platform to say, hey, on this VM, it has a license type now of rel_BYOS, so only bill at the rel BYOS level. So let's go ahead and run this. It'll take a couple seconds, but as I mentioned, what's happening right now is the platform is doing its thing. It's saying, hey, look, I've got a rel BYOS license type. I'm going to apply it to this VM. And then if it's successful, I should see a big blob of JSON coming out, which will contain basically all the details about my VM. You notice I specifically requested a JSON output as my final argument. You can do this in the Azure CLI. You can do a table output. I find the JSON output in this case to be a lot more useful because it will contain every single detail about this VM called rel 7.8 latest. So you can see a bunch of cool things here. We could spend all day talking about this, but I'm going to highlight one specific field, and that is a license type. So the license type value on this VM is now rel_BYOS, and that's the special hybrid benefit license type value. And that will tell the platform to bill at a rel BYOS billing rate. What else is available? As you can imagine, SLES is also available. So let's go look at the help text for AZVM update, because that'll give us some more details, and it's identical for AZVM create. So up here you can see there's a license type, and you can specify the license type value, and in the allowed values you've got rel BYOS, SLES BYOS as two of the allowed values. You can use those values to specify that the VM should be a hybrid benefit VM and should bill at the BYOS rate. So that's the CLI. You're probably wondering how it looks in the portal. And I've got a portal loaded up and ready to go for you here. So this is a rel VM. I created this VM actually quite recently off of a rel pay-as-you-go image from the marketplace. This is actually rel 8.2, but that doesn't really matter for the purpose of this demo. There's a licensing section inside the configuration section in the VM page. And under licensing, I have my subscription enabled for Red Hat Cloud Access. So that allows me to see this radio button. And I can go, yes, I will confirm that I have enabled, that I have eligible Red Hat Cloud Access subscription to attach to this VM. And I save it, and that's done. So this VM has now been updated to rel BYOS. The experience is similar for SLES. So this is a SLES 15 VM. I just switched tabs for those of you that might be confused. It's running in a subscription. And under the configuration page, just like for rel, you can click, yes, I would like to use an existing SUSE subscription, confirm it, and save it. And that's all it takes. And then we're done. So this is the VM update experience. It's very, very similar in the VM create experience. So this is the VM create page. And what I'm doing here is let's try a rel 8.2 VM on a subscription. So this Alfred's demo apparatus subscription, I have deliberately not enabled Red Hat Cloud Access on this. So this will prevent me from creating a VM and using the hybrid benefit. So you notice over here on my rel VM, I had my radio boxes that I could click yes. This doesn't exist if your subscription is not part of the Red Hat Cloud Access program. So do make sure that your subscription, if you're using this for Red Hat VMs, that make sure that your subscription is a part of the Red Hat Cloud Access program. It's a prerequisite here. Now, the SLES experience is basically identical to the update experience. For SLES, I can just click yes, I confirm I have a SUSE subscription. Let's see, I think I have the other fields correct, so I can go ahead and review and create. Things are good, and then I can go ahead and create my VM. So I'll create it. We don't really need to see it finish. Here's some SSH. This is a cool feature, actually. You should probably check this out separately. But that wraps up the end of my hybrid benefit demo. So let's flip back to the slides. So coming back to the summary here, you can get started with the Azure Hybrid Benefit Linux preview at this form. It's available at aka.ms/ahb-linux-form. There's also a couple more links here to learn more about the hybrid benefit. There's one that goes to azure.microsoft.com, and then you can also learn more about Linux on Azure at azure.com/linux. We've also included a couple links at the bottom to tell you a little bit more about pay-as-you-go pricing and software prepaid plans that I mentioned earlier in this presentation. With that, I'll thank you for your time and hope you have a great rest of the day wherever you are watching this.